Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing you energy matters in an informal setting. In today's episode, we'll turn our attention to Europe's environmental markets, guarantees of origin, to be precise. Prices have traded around 15-month lows on strong supply and wheat auctions. What is happening and where are prices heading? Helping me, Richard Sverrisson, to discuss the key issues in the guarantees of origin market is Daniel Arnesson of Veit. A warm welcome to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
So I alluded to the prices for guarantees of origin. I think we could say the calendar 2023 product is now trading under €1, around €1. What's going on? I mean, prices have been so much higher, and maybe even more than halved since the start of the year. What's happening, Daniel?
Well, essentially, what has happened is that compared to 2022, what we have seen is a significant oversupply, and that is the market is starting to realize it, and it started to realize it around mid-year last year. That we saw an oversupply. Like if looking at hydro, for instance, it was consistently lying a bit above 2022. And then in August, we saw rainfall and higher production as well. And in the price curves, you actually see the prices going down from then on. So it's quite clear that it is weather-related, this. And also we saw huge higher than normal capacity build-out on the renewable side in the AIB region.
So it's more to do with then the abundant hydropower supply that's then pressing prices down.
Yeah, we also saw beneficial wind conditions for production as well. So we've seen higher there as well.
And we see quite a big difference between the calendar 23 products and the calendar 24 product. What's the difference? What's the reason for the price difference there, Daniel?
Yeah. So one of the reasons is essentially if you buy a car that lasts for 20 years, it's worth more than if it only lasts for 10 years, right? But also, like if you look at how the certificates are used, like not all countries allow you for swapping vintages when you are disclosing your energy mix. So that makes 2023 not useful in certain jurisdictions.
Which ones in particular would that be the case?
Well,
for?
Spain, I know, I don't have on the top of my head a good overview of it, but like in Scandinavia, you allow for swapping. Italy has introduced it as well now. Spain, not. They don't do it in Germany either, to my knowledge. This is also something that we're looking into more now because we have really realized that it is affecting the market, and we also need to take these things into consideration when we are modeling prices and the fundamentals of the market.
Yeah. I mean, for some, it may seem a bit odd as well that you're trading calendar 23 when that we're already in 2024.
Yeah.
What's the reason for that's being traded?
Well, that's also coming to do with the disclosure deadlines that it's in March, right? So generally you don't know how the consumption profile by the end of on the 31st of December, right? So you need to have some time there. But yeah, so that's why it's still traded. And in Germany, it's even later.
Okay. So do you think then that sort of the approach of the compliance period you're saying now, end of March, do you think that will lend some support to prices?
Well, that's where we see the transactions in the AIB statistics. That doesn't mean that the trades have been completed by then, right? So it could lend some support, but it's not certain. It depends on how market participants have positioned themselves ahead of this disclosure period.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, the AIB is the Association of Issuing Bodies, isn't it? For those, so
that's, sorry.
No, I mean, that's
when you're in the field, you're talking acronyms.
Absolutely, there's quite a lot of acronyms in this market, in particular, isn't there, Daniel? I
think,
for
sure.
Absolutely, but I think some of my colleagues who look into this market in particular, talk a lot about the auctions. What's your view of guarantees of origin auctions? Do they kind of distort the market prices?
Well, I actually think that auctions are good. So I'm one of those who are for full production disclosure. And this is a step in that direction, like issuing GOs for also supported renewable power generation. And it also, like, it's beneficial for liquidity. But one of the issues that we have seen is that liquidity demand is also important for liquidity. And that's where it hasn't kept pace in 2023. And that's what we see now. I can't remember when, but like mid last year as well. Like it started to, they were oversubscribed or undersubscribed. So the auctions didn't sell all of their GOs. And that's kind of been a domino effect since then. And we're still seeing that now in auction coming up in March.
And this is in particular in, say, for example, in Italy and France, right?
Yeah. So in Italy, that's a colleague of mine recently wrote an update on it and how they've been setting the prices too high. Like they set it 5 days before the auction. And if you have a consistently decreasing price, commonly it can end up too high then, right? If it's the reversed, it's not a problem. But when prices are going down, it becomes a problem if they set too high floor prices for the auctions.
And who's doing the setting of these prices?
As I understand it, it is the GSE there.
In Italy, yeah?
Yeah, in Italy.
Which is the regulator? Or?
Yeah, I think that's the regulator. I'm not the specialist in the Italian markets in our team. Yeah.
But then when you have these Italian guarantees of origin auctions, they're heavily undersubscribed, and maybe some even hardly any participants at all. Does that exert additional pressure on guarantees of origin prices in the market generally?
Yeah, it does, and I know by talking through with market participants that they are actually keeping an eye on the auctions, right? So auctions are becoming very central when it comes to price setting, also for the OTC market, and it can also, I imagine, affect when deals are happening. So if you are close to an auction and you believe price is going to go down, you rather wait with clearing a transaction or agreeing to prices if you believe that the prices might be a bit too high. And 2023 has been like that.
Because now, the next auction, I mean, in Italy, certainly, you can have all these unsold GOs coming to the auction on the 20th of March, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that could exert a lot of downward pressure.
Yeah, it can. And if looking at Italian buyers, what I've heard at least, if they can pay a cheaper price, they do that. That's what
very price sensitive. Of course, but that makes sense. I mean, that's what market's there for, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, but do you see demand for GEOs picking up at all? Or do you think that the development of new renewable plants, new renewable facilities, will they actually outpace demand?
Yeah, so one thing with the geo market is that historically it has been very supply focused. Auctions are supply focused as well, and all renewable capacity build out targets are also supply focused, right? And that has been one issue. What we have seen in the last few years is that the geo market has been more affected by regulatory and legislative incentives on the demand side as well. So, for instance, we have seen the state aid scheme for indirect emission costs, where trade-exposed and power-intensive industry can source 30% GEOs and be eligible for state aid to mitigate the additional cost that comes from buying electricity that is covered by the EU ETS. So these incentives have come, and interestingly, they came before the 2022 hike, right, in price. So, and we see more of these coming with the European Sustainability Reporting Standard and so forth. So if these legislations are coupled by, like financial incentives and so forth, I see that demand could pick up. Also, what has happened, what we've seen is that the macroeconomic situation that we've seen in Europe with high inflation rate and lower productivity or production in industry has also resulted in lower electricity demand, and that translates into the demand of geos as well. So when you're looking at for 2024, where there's a little bit more positive outlook on the economic side, their demand could pick up a bit. But I do believe that decision makers or policy makers, they need to focus also on the demand side. Like if you focus solely on supply side with CFDs and so forth, you run the risk of outcrowding or outcompeting already existing generation, and that can be dangerous. We've seen that in the Elsøt system in Sweden, Norway, where prices plummeted and generators that were early in it suffered greatly because of this.
Absolutely. So what kind of measures would you like policymakers to undertake to do? What would you like to see them put in practice?
Yeah, so this is a bit tricky because ever since the legislative framework of the geo market and like the targets in the EU were set up, it's kind of a political compromise. So the Commission wanted to have it as a support system, the geos, where you had like portfolio standards on companies and suppliers so that they were obliged to buy this. But that couldn't happen in the end because Germany were proposing feed-in tariffs and so forth. But I actually see that in the legislation as it is now, there can be changes with sector coupling and also introduction of indicative targets for industries and so forth that are not really directly where geos actually can play a role. And the Commission has actually said, like, you need to cancel geos in order to claim that you produce renewable hydrogen classified as renewable fuel of non-organic origin, right, under the those targets. And I would like to see that some of the indicative targets for industries, but also for buildings, for instance, are incentivized. If they can't be mandated, at least incentivized with tax rebates and so forth. Because I think that there needs to be a balanced approach in terms of supply and policy, also from a policy or decision-making.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just also wondering what you think, would prices return to 2022 levels?
So that depends, as I said, like that depends on corporate uptake of, so it's also voluntary targets here. But I would say that regulatory incentives matters. And I would not underestimate the impact that for instance, the state aid schemes in Europe have had on the geo market. So I think that's very, very important.
I think, if I return to the supply side as well, Daniel, and talk about, one sort of fairly controversial aspect is the nuclear geos, isn't it? Yeah. And like, especially coming from France. I mean, do you see those coming in and flooding the market and exerting also downward pressure that we've talked about earlier?
Yeah, so that depends again. So it depends on, certainly there are a lot of market participants that are more interested in the carbon attributes that are contained in the geos, right? And for those stakeholders, nuclear geos is obviously a welcome feature. But we also see already that nuclear are oversupplied, like they are not consumed to the same extent as renewables. So renewables are more highly valued indicating that the many in the market are actually interested in the renewable attributes as well. And this you can also again see in some policies, and some countries refer to when there are incentives, carbon-free electricity. Not surprisingly, France is one of those, and others are referring to renewable, like more renewable-driven or focused incentives.
Because these labels are quite important, aren't they? I mean, you could be accused of greenwashing or, but carbon-free to green electricity, they're two different things, right?
Carbon-free and
green electricity.
Yeah, of course. So like the thing with nuclear is of course, it's carbon-free, at least from a generation-only perspective. But there are other downside to it, like how do you store this? It's certainly not renewable, and so forth. Yeah. Meanwhile, you have that in renewable technologies, but also with renewable technologies, you have issues, and you can see that in the kind of preference for specific technologies under the GEO system. Like some are not interested and don't want to meddle with biomass, for instance.
But I think, this is of course, it's a fascinating debate because some countries, some companies will want to buy nuclear GEOs, and that's absolutely their right to do so. Whereas others will want to focus on other guarantees of origin, which reflects maybe more wind or solar. But that's just the nature of the market, and that's where the prices are so different as well, right?
Yes. It's a supply and demand.
Absolutely, it's a standard market. Yeah, but there has been some controversy in the guarantees of origin market, and you mentioned the AIB, the Association of Issuing Bodies. They, last year they suspended Iceland from trading guarantees of origin. There's also some question marks around potentially if the same could happen to Norway. Do you think this issue of double counting is now been eradicated, or could it creep up again? And is it sort of looming? There's a shadow looming over the guarantees of origin market around this issue?
Yeah, so I actually think it's good that the AIB is engaging with these issues. It can also drive the discussion or the debate on an EU level, right? Bearing in mind that the AIB is not an EU institution, right? But I don't see this issue as solved. And I can't say that the result of the Icelandic case did provide much clarity either. You had the AIB stating that they will continue looking into double counting and claiming. Meanwhile, the Icelandic authorities stating that the ECS rules, like the rules under the AIB, is not addressing double claiming. So they said that they are acting within their kind of within the rules, so to play. So I would say it's not clear there. Also, one of the things here that we have to remember is that these cases are not just something that AIB engage in. So like, let's look into Norway now. There needs to be a member of the AIB that is a issuing body, a national or regional issuing body in the EU EEA, or the energy community for that matter, or a market participant that raise a non-compliance complaint. And then it can be triggered. So, and looking at Norway, for instance, and coming back to the state aid, here they are using a location-based method where they essentially say that beneficiaries of state aid can get state aid for free because, well, they are in Norway and it's majority renewable. Meanwhile, in Germany and in other countries in Europe, they use a market-based approach. So there is a double counting issue between these policies there. The problem is that it's not sufficiently harmonized in Europe.
How do you go about harmonizing that? I mean, surely this is quite crucial. Otherwise, this issue is going to keep coming back, keep haunting, this, location versus market,
Yeah. So I would say like in Europe, it is more harmonized than when looking into Norway and Iceland, because they are not members of the EU. So in Norway, you have not adopted the Renewable Energy Directive. You have the first Renewable Energy Directive. So it's not in its language. It doesn't require as much when you're selling a PPA, for instance, as a green. In the new Renewable Energy Directive, it's very clear that if PPA is green or claimed to be renewable, it needs to be supported by geos. And that's not under the EEA agreement yet. And it has taken them a long time to scrutinize that. But there's also other levels to harmonizing the geo system that could be seen as an issue. And one of these things is the disclosure, like, are you going to have monthly, yearly, and what is it shifted? Should you be able to use 2023 for 2024 and so forth?
Exactly. So what's your take on this? Should there be 24/7 counting? Should there be annual reporting? You've had several 24/7 programs out there. How successful have they been, for example?
So that's not my expertise on their success.
Sure, yeah.
I can imagine if you ask them, they have been very successful.
Sure. But where do you stand on the 24/7 versus sort of annual reporting? I mean, where are we going? What's the direction where should the direction of travel be?
Yeah, so essentially, like, the benefit with 24/7 is that the renewable energy production will be more, it will be built it will be placed where it is needed, for instance, and it will be built to produce when it is needed to be produced, so to speak. And that's why the Commission is linking it to the production of renewable hydrogen, for instance. There are obvious benefits with that. Some of the downside is that it would limit the engagement of different market participants. I would say that there would be fewer actors in the market, and that can be a problem.
So that's the problem for liquidity, then, you're saying?
Yeah, I would say that. But then one of the main problems here, and that comes with what I talked about earlier, that's the demand. So, like, is there a demand for 24/7? Sure, then it's good, right? But demand side measures are a general problem with the geo market. And I think, that's like voluntary, we see it's picking up, right? But we need to engage more in policy.
We need to have more of an impetus there to sort of harmonize as well on the demand side, right?
Yeah, like to have, for the state aid to be very efficient, Norway should go for market-based as well. That would certainly drive the energy transition more than otherwise. And so this discussion between 24/7 or annual, that comes later in a way, I would say. Like, you need to deal with the demand. But one thing that the 24/7 do address is critics that say, well, that's just greenwashing. So, like, and that's some of the beauty. It's kind of like a challenge for the geo market, but it's also one of the beauties is that it's quite flexible. It can speak to specific stakeholders. Like, if you have a demand for 24/7, now with granular certificates, it's possible. But I would say, like, the majority of the market is not demanding that right now.
I mean, I just sort of finally want to touch on the UK here as well. Don't you? Now, the UK has its own sort of guarantees of origin, REGOs, so renewable energy guarantees of origin. How much upside is there here? Because the UK no longer recognises geos from the European Union. So what's happening here? What are the dynamics going on here?
Yeah, so certainly we saw a squeezing supply, and that did affect prices. We saw prices going up to £25, I think, per megawatt hour. And I think, but at those levels, the demand was quite scarce, which I would say indicate that at least we see a limit there right now. But essentially, it's like with the geo market as well. Like the level we can reach is dependent on the willingness to pay for the off-takers, and the willingness to pay for off-takers are dictated by what money they have to maneuver with. So like there is a limit, and it looked like it was like £25 there, I would say, in the UK. And going forward, like if I'm not mistaken, forward prices are traded below, which indicates that market participants believe that the capacity build out will have a positive impact on prices for the view of the consumers, so to speak. So it will see lower prices, but we'll see how it develops. And as with the geo market, it's highly dependent on weather as well, regardless of how you're building out the capacity. We are looking at, in our long-term model, for instance, now I'm jumping from regos to geos, but there we have looked at supply differences between using 2020 and 2022 weather years, and we see a difference in almost 100 terawatt hour. Wow. So weather does have a huge impact.
Absolutely, and certainly in this part of the world. But the guarantees of origin markets often come under criticism for being not mature enough or not transparent generally. Yeah. It's certainly in the same level of price transparency that exists elsewhere. What's your view here, Daniel?
Yeah, so certainly the geo market it's a maturing market. It's constantly evolving, right? Prices, the one thing that auction has contributed with is greater insight into prices. But it's not only with respect to prices that the geo market is lacking transparency, it's also with respect to the fundamentals. Like you have several issuing bodies that you can go to and get updated on supply cancellation with lag though. And then, so that's a lag there. And then if you look at the AIB statistics, which is compiling the data in a way, there is even greater lag. So it's very difficult to get real-time fundamentals data on geos. And it's not made easier by the complexity of the geo market, being that some countries don't allow issuance for supported geos, like Germany, and others do. So you need to take these complexities in consideration, and the combination of the opacity and the complexity, it's not really good for market participants. It's good for Vate as an analytical company providing insights, but not if you're engaging in the market. Then you need to have this expertise.
Because it's quite a patchwork, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. Daniel, thank you very much for being a guest on the Montel Weekly podcast.
Thank you very much.